Hey there, sports history fan. Arnie Chapman here from the Sports History Network. Now, before you jump into this episode, I wanted to share with you an exciting giveaway we have going on with Home Field Apparel. We have a digital $50 gift card to homefieldapparel.com for one lucky fan of the Sports History Network. All you got to do is head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways to sign up. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways.
Hello, this is Ross Bliley from the podcast Pigskin Tales. This podcast is sponsored by Sterling Soap Company. With products sold throughout 41 locations around the globe, Sterling Soap Company has a unique assortment of products to choose from for your loved one for the holidays. Handmade artisan soaps created by Roderick and Amanda Lovin since 2012, these products are affordable and provide great value. Act now and save on your shipping costs. If you purchase $75 or more, your shipping cost is free in the United States. Shop now online at sterlingsoap.com.
I'd like to welcome everybody back to the Football's Family Podcast. And this time of year, one of those reasons why, among other things, I am not an NFL GM. I mean, what do you do? If you are a GM at this point, do you start to partake with free agency? Is this how you want to spend your money, your situation? Does that help you do better by building through the NFL free agency, or do you build through the draft? Now, we've seen through the history of the NFL, sometimes you find a really good free agent, like Peyton Manning did with the Broncos. He was injured. The Colts picked up Andrew Luck, and then Peyton Manning went to the Broncos and won a Super Bowl. Did really well. Did really well. But sometimes you find situations where people overspend on a free agent and it doesn't turn out well. Most recent one is Aaron Rodgers. And now people are like, well, where is he going to go next? What is he going to do? Just stay away from the Titans. Just please stay away from the Titans. Don't come down here. There's also talk that the Titans might get Russell Wilson. Well, I would rather Russell Wilson than Aaron Rodgers, but that's just me. But what would you do if you were a GM? What would you do? Now, to me, it's not a problem with what I'm seeing with somebody like the Bills paying, they paid outrageous, not necessarily a free agent, but they paid about $330 million to keep Josh Allen. That's a given. Don't let him ever become a free agent. Pay him what he needs. But then you have the Colts here, who a couple hours before the recording of this particular episode signed Daniel Jones. Look what he said: a 1-year deal. This is according to CBSSports.com. A 1-year deal worth $17.7 million, up to $17.7 million. Colts fans, you're probably going to have him starting this next year. And Anthony Richardson did not turn out to be what they thought he did. Maybe improves, but right now Daniel Jones looks like he could be your starting quarterback. Uh, the Vikings are in need of a quarterback. They have one on the roster, again, according to CBSSports.com, J.J. McCarthy. Now, J.J. McCarthy is a good player, but would you want him to be the only one on your roster? And they give a listing on this of several quarterbacks that could be his backup. Winston, and Joe Flacco being two of them. What do you do? Vikings, you had a great season last year. Sam Darnold did that for you in a lot of ways. Your offense is amazing. Your defense was great, but you get to the point of the basically second round of playoffs, your first game, and you get beaten by the Commanders. Well, does J.J. McCarthy give you that edge that Sam Darnold didn't get? Well, I don't know. We don't know because J.J. McCarthy didn't play. Sam Darnold did and did well. He got paid as well from the Seahawks. So what do you do? How is it that you would build the team? So I started thinking about how the NFL free agency has become a big thing for the NFL, but it wasn't always that way. It wasn't always that way. And for me to understand the NFL free agency, I always had a problem, I guess, maybe not always, but I've had a problem at one point or another understanding what the difference is of the categories of free agency. Free agency has not been a thing for very long. The free agency that we're used to really came about in 92, but the free agency that we're used to right now is in 93 to present. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the history of the NFL free agency. Uh, but to understand the free agency, we have to understand what free agency is. Free agency is not necessarily a way for a person just to leave a team and go to another team of their choice. While people who are waived or cut can do that, people who are on the team and the team doesn't necessarily want them to leave, they have different ways to view this. Now, a free agent is what it sounds like, but there are a difference between a restricted free agent and an unrestricted free agent. A restricted free agent, maybe this is according to TennesseeTitans.com, which I was looking at their free agents, our free agents. There's a bunch of them. We're losing a lot of players this year that we may not re-sign. Restricted free agent may be subject to a qualifying offer. A restricted or unrestricted free agent may be designated by his prior club as a franchise player or as a transitional player. What that basically means is that if you have, according to this, if you have 3 accrued seasons, the player with 3 accrued seasons who have received a qualifying offer become restricted free agents when their contract expires on the end of the 2024 season on March the 12th. Unrestricted free agents have completed 4 or more accrued seasons upon expiration of their 2024 contract. An unrestricted free agent is free to sign with any club with no draft choice compensation owed to his club. The problem with that is if you are a first round draft pick, according to the collective bargaining agreement, if you're a first round draft pick, you get a 5th-year option. But the 5th-year option is you have a kind of a small, unless you're earlier draft picks, you have a smaller amount of money given to you over the span of 4 years. They're all mostly, if not all, guaranteed. But that 5th-year option, you get paid a lot more, just depending on the position, draft pick, that sort of stuff. It also allows the team to be able to see if they want to keep you. So you'll hear a lot of teams who they will not pick up the 5th-year option. If the 5th-year option is picked up, that means the team really wants to negotiate with you or wants to keep you around longer. So, first round, the Titans with their first round pick, their first overall pick this year, whomever they may get, which I'm hoping is Travis Hunter, but we'll see. If they pick up Travis Hunter, he has a 4-year guaranteed contract. He's going to get paid for 4 years, whether he gets cut or not. The 5th-year option comes up, and what I understand about that is he's going to get paid a lot more for that 5th year, but that opens the door for his second contract. His second contract, if you ever seen history, once this new CBA was brought in just a few years ago, the second contract is when they get paid. Not the first, but the second. Now, in the first contract with somebody like a Sam Bradford, who and Jamarcus Russell back before this happened, they got paid a lot more money than people today, and that caused a lot of problems in the clubhouse and in the locker room. So what the CBA did was to make sure that the rookie they had what is called a rookie wage scale. That rookie wage scale allowed them to fit the cap situation, allowed them to fit, you know, the needs of the team. If that player plays well, then obviously they're going to get paid well, even if it wasn't for the team that drafted them. So when you look at that, the qualifying offers could be money, could be draft picks, could be other things. But if a player who's restricted signs with another team, then the previous team can negotiate with him, and they have something called a right of first refusal on any offer sheet the player signs. If the old club does not match that offer, it may receive draft choice compensation depending upon the amount of the qualifying offer. Now, basically, what that means is you can sign But if you sign with another club, then the first team has the right to renegotiate or negotiate with you. If that doesn't work out, then the old team gets something from the new team. So if the player's worth something to you, you might give up a second or third or maybe even a first round pick for that player. Then again, that's why you find that this free agent stuff is pretty hard to get, pretty hard to understand, and pretty hard to work out. For every Peyton Manning you get, you might get several Aaron Rodgers. Big name players that do not perform. Brett Favre was one of those. Big name players that do not perform. The biggest player that you'll find in the recent history, and I say recent, the last 30 years, that really drove free agency to the way it is Reggie White. Reggie White came off from being a player who made a huge deal with the Eagles. I remember the Eagles with Reggie White. He was probably the best defensive player in the NFL at that time. And he came over to the Packers via free agency. He really brought that in to service. Now, according to Patriots.com, which kind of gives you a really good overview of the history of free agency, it was said that at this time when it's called the White Settlement, and it says right here, quote, which incorporated into the 1993 CBA and brought about a new form of free agency. Any veteran with at least 5 years of experience, eventually lowered to four after certain thresholds were met, would become an unrestricted free agency. However, it allowed teams to name its most valuable player as a franchise player in the first or final 2 years of the CBA. And it could name a transition players, two players in the first year of the agreement, which each of which restricted their movement on the market. So when you look at the history of free agency, the one thing that you'll notice is that the team, the owners always held the upper hand. They always held the upper hand. It was never an idea of the players being able to negotiate. The very first part, the very first thing brought up on Patriots.com is called the reserve rule from 1920 to 1946. This basically said that the team had the right to re-sign his players every year until that player wants to quit. It didn't matter if the player wanted to go to another team. Of course, there weren't that many teams that they could travel to, and then when it expanded, it still didn't matter. If the owner signed a player and that player signed with them, no matter how bad the team is or no matter how little the owner paid them, the player would be stuck for them. The teams could play that player until they no longer wanted them. And then really, they didn't have anywhere else to go. So you have teams who are looking to make money. Obviously, that's the whole goal of the NFL to make money. You had teams with a lot of money, you had teams with very little money. This allowed the teams to really kind of to keep the same players, to grow on them, and they make money off of them. If they sign them to a low deal at the very beginning, they really didn't have much of a choice. The players did. So what I see about the reserve rule is it was very much centered toward the owners. That doesn't change. Even now, with salary cap increases as much as it has, and this year it's incredibly high, the owners are still benefiting from that because they raise TV rates and revenue through that, which compensates for everything they do. Also, you find that tickets goes up, the food goes up, the clothing and the merchandise goes up. The owners are making money. So when they say they're not, they get the benefit of these new stadiums. They get all this stuff. The owners are still making money. The players, on the other hand, are making money too. But it took them years to get to this point. It took them times where they would strike. In 1987, if I remember this correctly, in 1987, there was a strike that didn't last very long. But that's the year that they brought in players off the street to play in the NFL because they missed just a few games. This is the strike that that got us the movie The Replacements with Keanu Reeves, which I really like that movie a lot. But you see what happens when the NFL players start to push back and their union starts to push back and really it during this strike, courts sided with the NFL owners, not the NFL Players Association. The owners always held the upper hand, and the commissioner will respond to the owners because the owners are the ones that pay the commissioner. The owners don't pay for the players so much to represent themselves. They pay for the commissioner to represent the owners. You go down to 1947 to 1962, you have something called the 1 year option, which allows teams to use a reserve clause one time after the expiration of the player's contract. The option year could not contain a reserve clause, which gave the players the ability to negotiate and enter a contract with any team. Players at this time became free agents, free to sign anywhere for the first time. And according to this particular article, it said that R.C. Owens was the first person to use this to change teams when he went from the 49ers to the Colts. Now, later on, when you have owners fighting back against this, because basically free agency opens up a bidding war. And that's why you find when the NFL merge was going to, NFL, AFL had their thing before they merged, the owners started to realize that there would be a bidding war that would basically, I would say, bankrupt the teams because, again, you had some teams like the Chiefs, like the Giants, who had money. They had money. They had the ability to buy things. And even the Chargers at one point had money. But most of the other teams could not afford that in order to keep up with them. Houston had money. But in order to keep up with these situations, the NFL had to pretty much put a limit on it. Said, you know what? We can't afford to keep going. This is the Rozelle rule kind of pops into play because this is the next one. Uh, the NFL realized that they would bid themselves out of existence. Reagency with a salary cap, with a hard salary cap, made this possible for both the players to get something and NFL owners to get something as well. The Rozelle rule, which came up from 1963 to 1976, it said that the rule allowed the commissioner at his discretion to the right to award compensation from a team signing a free agency to the team losing a free agent unless the teams agreed to compensation prior to signing. This could be draft picks, players, cash, whatever. And the decision that the commissioner made was final. This right here is an important aspect because Rozelle could determine if this player was worth this type of pick. This also allowed for free agency to become more real to a lot of teams. I might pick up player A here, but I might have to give up a possibility of player B who could be better than player A. There was a challenge. The NFL Player Association in 1976 challenged the Rozelle rule. The court found the rule violated Section 1 of the Sherman Act as an unreasonable restraint on trade. The court stated that the rule deterred the clubs from negotiating with and signing free agents. That's what I'm talking about. That if the Chargers want to sign player A, then they have to go and compensate the Oilers for somebody, and it would restrict their ability to sign things, which would restrict the players' ability to make money. And this would cause their ability to hinder. It would cause all this to be a problem. So what happened is the NFL Players Association, it says here, sacrificed its free agency victory and employed and other employment benefits in the 1977 CBA. The Rozelle rule was replaced by something very similar, the right of first refusal and a compensation structure for losing free agents. And that right of first refusal went from 1977 to 1988. Now you go down here to about 1993, as I mentioned just a minute ago. 1993 gave people the right to free agency. You have to serve a certain amount of people, or excuse me, a certain amount of years to receive free agency. One would cause compensation to happen, others would be complete free agency. In order to get that, the salary cap was given. So when you go back to the 60s into the 70s, early 60s into the close to the 70s, where you find the AFL, NFL teams were bidding themselves out of existence, basically is what they were doing. The people remembered that or recalled that and brought in a salary cap for free agency, which means that if you wanted to sign Reggie White, then you had to keep your salary below a certain area, a certain number. Otherwise, you would be violating the salary cap and you would either be penalized or you couldn't sign somebody. And that's something you find at the very beginning of the NFL, where the very beginning of the NFL free agency in 1993 and following, you would find that certain teams could not keep the players they wanted. 49ers, I believe, was one of them. So they had to cut a lot of people to keep it below a salary cap. This is actually kind of interesting. Uh, in 1994, it says the salary cap was introduced to the NFL because player salaries in 1993 reached the agreed upon 76% of team revenues. Listen to this. The most recent one that we got this year is close to $300 million. Back in 1994, 34.6 million was the salary cap. So what you find is that restricted free agency or unrestricted free agency hits different determined on the person and the team signing them. When they're unrestricted, you can go after them. Restricted, though, you have to be careful because if I sign them, the other team could sign them. And if it doesn't work out, then the team signing the player ultimately has to send the former team draft picks or money. But the draft, the free agency started to take root because of Reggie White and what he did in the lawsuit against the NFL. But free agency brought about the salary cap. So everything that you see here when they said we have to keep it below the cap or somebody's way above the cap, so we have to trade things, really found root in free agency. It's actually pretty interesting, but at the same time, I don't know all the ins and outs. Lawyers tend to do that. So you have people that get signing bonuses that help the free agency, or help the help the salary cap and things like that. So it's just a lot of stuff going on here. So while you see all these people being signed to free agent contracts, keep a couple things in mind. Number one, there's a lot to take into account to each one of those contracts. And number two, a lot of people went through a lot of trouble to get the NFL where it is today in order for those people making a lot of money today to make the money that they did. I want to thank y'all for listening to the Football's Family podcast.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you got to do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.